ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between.
He's a South Texan poppy poet living that hashtag middle-class gay life. It's Chibi.
She's a little bit Selena, a little bit J-Lo, and a whole lot of Pisces. It's Rocky.
And this is Words and Shit,
the show where you get to know the person behind the poetry.
Brought to you by Write Art Out
and Gemini's Productions. Hola, amiguita.
Hola, how you doing?
I mean, better now that I get to stretch.
Old people things.
No, you don't understand, okay? I was in a car for 22 and a half hours, okay? Mm-hmm. 22 and a half hours. Mm-hmm. 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 It was a long drive from Fort Lauderdale to San Antonio.
When was that again? Well, it's been a couple of days already. Are you even home already?
You don't have to call me that. It still happened.
It still happened. Gotta say a week ago, but it's okay.
But on this 22 and a half hour road trip, back pain, not my favorite thing about road trips. My favorite thing about road trips, playlists.
Yes. I love a good playlist.
Yeah, so it was a good mixture of music depending on who had control at the time. And so it was, there were some throwbacks in there, and there was some modern jams, and there was some things that I had never heard before in my life. But it had me thinking, what's a song that you, or band, I don't know, however you want to take this question, that you recently heard or that you ever hear that like takes you back to like a specific moment of your life? Right.
Ooh, it's so funny because you were talking about like road trips and have like playlists, because just recently I went to go celebrate a friend's birthday and I brought my partner along with me. We're in the car driving in Brooklyn, and I was like prepping him because I was like, listen, you're going to go to a queer Latina birthday. I need you to like be up to speed. You're now dating a Latina, okay? You need to know these old school reggaeton songs, okay? These pereos. So if I'm going to take you to a perreo, do not embarrass me. So we were playing some like old school, like, and I don't think they're old school, but we were talking about like Daddy Yankee, Don Omar, like early when they first came out.
Okay, friend.
I know there are old school, but the one that I think we both agree upon that, like, who always brings me back, who always brings so much joy? Mr. Worldwide. Okay. Pitbull. Dale. Dale. Him and Sean Paul. I feel like both of them, like Sean Paul, I think I know only 3 full solo songs by Sean Paul, and then he's on a feature on every single song. Remember? It was like both Pitbull and Sean Paul were like features for a good like 10 years. Yeah.
They made their entire careers off of featuring on other people's songs.
Yeah.
This is all you needed.
Yes.
Songs of your youth.
Yes. And I brought it back to, I was like, if we're going to learn about Pitbull, we're going to do like old school. So it's like culo, right? Culo. Do you remember? We had no business. Culo.
I'm here for it. I'm here.
Yeah. How about you, friend? What throwback? If not, Mr. Worldwide or Shanta Paul.
It's not at all. I am in a whole nother world. Those were not the songs of my youth. I was surrounded by those songs. This is true.
Yes. Who wasn't?
I lived on the border, but those were not the songs of my youth. But the one that takes me back like every time, and it's so nostalgic. And you may not know this band, and a lot of our listeners might not know this band, but it's a little band out of Gainesville, Florida called Against Me.
Against Me. Okay.
Yes. No, that's fine. I didn't expect it. They got some their name kind of surfaced in the past few years because their lead singer came out as trans and now lives her life as a proud trans woman, and you don't see a lot of trans women as the front person of punk rock bands, right?
Sure.
But there's this feeling of like, it's just a bunch of friends drinking beer late at night, singing along together kind of thing. And like, it always takes me back to like late high school, early college days of just like, yeah, we're all just hanging out in someone's driveway.
Yes.
And without too many cares in the world. And, back when we thought we could still bring down the whole system instead of, assimilating into it. And, these carefree, rebellious anthems of our youth that, anytime one of their songs comes on, I'm like immediately transported there,
Amazing. And I feel like that's the same thing for all of us, whether it be the driveway in your home, at a basement party, leaving gene rubs all over the walls,
Yeah. Or in some shady, industrial technopunk, dance club.
Exactly. We're here for the memories.
Yeah.
As one punk song goes, thanks for the memories.
That's not a punk song. Please don't ever. Wow. Thank you for listening.
Sorry. Is it?
We'll now be leaving.
No, I'm so sorry for the Fall Out Boy people. Sorry.
No, but you're entirely right, and it was fun to dive into kind of like the seedy underbelly of our past and our youth, and the way that music like informed us and helped us find connection and family. Because I think that's the other thing that music does, is it brings us together, right? And through that, we find other people that we have things in common with, and find friends and family outside of our immediate circles that we can then connect with and grow up with, and potentially fall in love and marry, like our guest today, Grisel, did with their partner, and the conversations that we had. So I can't wait to share this conversation with everybody.
Me too. So Dr. Grisel E. Acosta, they is a professor at the City University of New York, CUNY, BCC, Bronx Community College. Their poetry collection, Things to Pack on the Way to Everywhere, was a 2020 finalist for the Andrés Montoya Poetry Prize, Get Fresh Books 2021. She's the editor of Latina Outsiders, creative writing editor at Chicana Latina Studies Journal, and a new poetry editor at WSQ Journal. Select work is in the Baffler Best American Poetry, Split This Rock, Acentos Review, and forthcoming an Inkwell Journal and Hopkins Review. They are a Geraldine Dodge Foundation Poet, Macondo Fellow, and a VONA alum. Here's our conversation with Dr. Grisel E. Acosta.
Not you saying E. Acosta.
I don't know how to say it because it's the Y.
It's a Y. Grisel Y. Acosta.
But in Spanish, it's Y.
Y. This is our conversation with Grisel Y. Acosta.
Oh, shit. Should I move on?
Let's get on with it. Let's go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited. Chibi and I are both really excited to have you here, Grisel. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing? I'm doing great.
I know. For those who are just listening, we are all wearing pink. It is not Wednesday, but it is definitely Friday. And we're trying to bring this pink, very bubbly spirit because we sure do need it after all of this.
We did not coordinate this, okay? Like this is my first time meeting Grisel, and Raquel and I talk, to prep for these shows, but we did not coordinate our outfits. This is just what was calling me from the closet, and I was like, that's right. Today's a pink day, and apparently the energy is transmutable. So I'm excited.
Yeah. We're super excited. we always kind of do a little check-in with our guests going on. It might be a heavy question going what's happening with the world, but you know what? How's your heart today, friend? I'm talking, yeah.
My heart is really good.
Yeah.
And there are things that I've deliberately done to make sure that that's the case. Because it is a very challenging time. Even like my own campus, University of New York has an encampment and all of that. So it's been really challenging. But you know, I just went to see the new Zendaya film Challengers, and you know, like I have a nice spot right across the bridge from New York, so get some nice Korean food, have a nice film, enjoy the beautiful weather that we're finally getting. I make a point to create joy, even though things can be, really, really tough in the world. So we all deserve joy despite what's going on. Yeah.
It's so real because the work that is currently happening, and for anyone that's listening, we're recording this at the beginning of May. All the work that's happening across universities across the country is so important, and especially both of y'all that work in the university sectors. I know you're directly impacted and involved, but also being able to like take moments to step away to recharge, right, so that we can continue to do the work. So that balance is really important. So props to you for maintaining that.
Thank you.
Well, before we dive in, we like to do this little section. So this little game that we play called speed dating so that the audience can start to get to know you just a little bit, right? There may be some people listening that are familiar. There may be some people that are brand new. We like to say, come for your favorites and discover new ones on this show. So we're going to ask you a series of questions, 4 to be exact. And we encourage you to answer as concisely as you feel is necessary to adequately reply. Okay? So, first question. It's a fill in the blank question. The intersection of art and activism looks like blank.
Immediately, I think of the word community. People coming together, making art together, understanding each other, sharing food, sharing their imaginations. Yeah, community.
Amazing. This was actually our first fill in the blank ever on this podcast. So, Grisel, I hope you feel great about that.
I've been listening to Brene Brown. I'm 10 years late to the party, but yes, Brene Brown is currently my higher power. So
amazing. Okay, so this one might be a little controversial. Grisel, we know that you grew up in Chicago, have deep roots in Chicago with your family and everything. So what do you like better, New York style pizza or Chicago style pizza?
Well,
wow.
That would be presupposing that there is New York style pizza.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
So here's the thing. What I mean by that is that there are lots of different parts of Italy and New York that are represented.
Yeah.
So you really are going to get different pizza kind of wherever you go. There are 2 particular kinds of pizza that Chicago is definitely known for. Obviously, deep dish. Whenever you say Chicago style pizza, people are going to know that you're talking about deep dish. However, there is a neighborhood style pizza that's very, very thin crust, almost cracker thin crust. And it's a big pie and you slice it on a grid. It's not sliced in triangles. It's like little square pieces and then the edges. And that is so delicious. So there's no question, Chicago.
You know what? Because I'm a hater. And I always think that like the deep dish is like more like a pie. But you know what? I didn't know about the very, very thin one. And that makes sense. You know, I'll like, I can see that. Okay.
That's the party pizza. That's for when you have to feed like an entire cumpleaños, you know, and like so many little kids are going to eat and you need the big party style pizza.
Okay.
Perfect.
I was in Chicago, was it last year? And we were having dinner with Bailita Hicks, Ruben Quesada, and his partner. And his partner is Chicago native. And he was like, why do people, like, I shouldn't have to fold my pizza, period. So it runs deep. On the same subject, I swear this is not coincidental. I asked this of everyone on our podcast because I love food. What is your favorite thing to eat? And it could be like a specific food item or a food dish, whatever you want.
Ooh, that's really difficult because I love all kinds of food, and I really love to bake. But right now, I could say right now, I am adoring Japanese and Korean food. They're very different, but there are some things that kind of, especially in my area here, that kind of blur at times. But right now, Japanese. Right now, sushi is just it for me. So.
Same. Japanese.
Yeah, it's so fresh. Like you feel alive after you've eaten it. You don't feel bogged down. It's just very, very healthy. I love it.
Agreed.
Amazing. All right. You're also, you know, a full professor at City University of New York, CUNY. And my last question for the speed dating round, right? Because you have these beautiful arrangements of books behind you. What is your favorite book to introduce to your students?
Ooh, well, I was just talking about this yesterday. So I'm not currently teaching it just because, especially after the pandemic, our students are still suffering. There's still a situation where it's just a little bit harder for them to purchase books. So I tend to create a reader. But when I was having them purchase books, one of my favorite books to share with the students was Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby Rivera. It's technically a YA book, but I really don't see it that way. I just see it. I mean, I know that they've marketed it that way, but I feel that it's just a novel. And it's, first of all, it part of it takes place in the Bronx. So I feel like my population of students really appreciate that. And it's about this college student that goes off to the West Coast to kind of do an internship and discover herself. She's queer. And there are parts of Juliet Takes a Breath that also take place in Miami. So we have kind of this trifecta of spaces where different groups of POC reside in the book. And I think that it's really interesting for students to see someone who is based in the Bronx, and this character, Juliet, to travel all around the world, or all around the US, I should say, and just kind of see how she reacts to different communities, and where she feels safe and how people welcome her in different ways. And as all of these undergraduates are beginning their own journeys, I think it demystifies kind of getting out of your comfort zone and just going for it. So I love introducing that book to students, and they love it too. Yeah.
No, I love that book too. I actually have like a couple of the quotes that I have in my room, and then every time I reread it, I'm just like, should I get a nape cut? I should get a nape cut. Should I?
Yes.
That's fantastic. I love Abby Rivera and the work that she's doing in all the spaces that now, you know, branched out to and inhabited. So queer Latina power. I'm here for it.
Yes.
Well, speaking of queer Latina power, it's now time for you to share your story, or anything you want to share in the form of a poem. Could you please kick us off with our first poem of the show?
Sure. So I think I'm gonna read something that is not in my book, which is right behind me. The yellow. I'm doing the wrong hand. There we go. The yellow things to pack on the way to everywhere. So this is something that is going to be coming out if everything works out properly. I think in the summer issue of Hopkins Review, and I'll read it and then I'll explain a little thing about it. All right. It's called The American Dream, but it's not what you think. The American Dream is a mall built on top of marshes housing the dead and ousted gangsters who land-grabbed estuaries and replaced them with fiefdoms dedicated to football, liquor licenses, and mansions bedecked with plaster lions and plastic flamingos that will eventually rot, salty, in the rising waters that once housed heron, crabs, and people who protected the sacred limbo of land and water. Now chlorine, water slides, and a Ferris wheel, neon signs begging for carnival dollars, reign as a sinking castle nowhere in the middle of what was stolen hundreds of years ago. And we pay for this entertainment. Oh yes, we will continue to pay. So the American Dream is a real mall in New Jersey that has been riddled with bankruptcies, accidents, and other controversies. So it's actually a real place. So when I saw it, I just had to write a poem about it.
No, it was funny because when you start saying American Dream and you're like, it's a mall. I was like, Grisel, do you know about the mall?
No, don't let Raquel go on a New Jersey tangent. Okay, let's bring it back.
Yeah, it's because I'm in Jersey. I mean, like I'm from Jersey, but I'm from Texas, and I'm also living in Brooklyn. But I take it's for those who don't know, like it's huge, and it's like it has theme parks. It has a water slide. It's like the Nickelodeon Universal like water slide inside, plus like a hotel. Plus, it's like right next to where the Giants play. I'm like, I'm so sorry. It's like where the football team. It's massive, and it's like like literally the human depiction of like what the ugliness of like capitalism is. It's so gross.
Yeah, it's very gross, and I pass it frequently because I go down to Newark often. So it's just so offensive, and like, you know, they took so long to build because they kept going bankrupt because they didn't have the money for it. And then like they have all these things hanging inside that have fallen onto people who are in the pool underneath. Like it's just not a good place. But I don't want to get sued, so it's still fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a good place, like the American Dream.
Yes. Yes.
I love that you opened us up with that poem, you know, because it really does highlight a number of things that as I was diving into your work and, you know, the kind of like who you are and what you do and how you move to the world, right? This kind of like anti-capitalist activism role. This also like environmental justice that seems to prevail itself through your work. And your upcoming book is called Wild, which to me infers, you know, nature, maybe nature fighting back. I don't know. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Wild, if you kind of took a Venn diagram, it does have to do with the environment and how we perceive our environment, but also it has to do with language used for women, and also mental health. So there's this idea that if you're a wild woman, you're dangerous, untamable, you know, dirty in some way. But then there's also this idea nature being wild and having to tame it as well. And then one thing that I've noticed since we've stopped using certain words to describe people who might have mental health challenges, we've been starting to use this word wild instead. Yeah. Oh, this is a wild situation. Like, we're not supposed to say crazy or things like that. But we still know what we mean when we use these words. And I grew up with everyone saying these words about someone who might have challenges in terms of mental health. So I just kind of wanted to explore those three areas in this book.
That is definitely, I think I also used wild, like what you're talking about, like how we transitioned from crazy to wild, because its language has so much of a of, power. It does have power. I also thought it's because maybe you were in New York, people were like, that's wild, like very dismissive, or like, that's wild, this like different types of slang. And so I kind of want to ask you, as you are, like Chippy said, that wild is this is your upcoming book and everything. You have also like kind of done some like recent readings too. Can you kind of talk about where have you read, and how has this your words really like inspire, or how are like your audience like reacting to what you're like saying in these like very predominant institutions like the Smithsonian and like Lincoln Center? These are very huge establishments in New York. So go ahead.
Well, first of all, I'm so grateful about the readings that I've had recently. So I kind of had this dream sequence of readings, one right after the other recently. First at the Smithsonian as part of their 1898 exhibit, which looks at different aspects of colonization, but then also the quote unquote liberation of certain spaces, but then at the same time, the occupation of the U.S. in these spaces. So it was looking at the Philippines, Puerto Rico, Cuba, and Guam. So that was really incredible. And the other readers were amazing as well. Luisa A. Gloria and many, many others that I can't list them all. So that was exciting. And then I read at Lincoln Center as part of the Daughters of Latin America anthology put together by Sandra Guzman, the editor. And it was a feminist reading, Afro-Latina centered, just a beautiful, beautiful night. And what was interesting is that I read from the anthology, one of the pieces from the anthology that was a contrapuntal, but then I also read a very old piece that I wrote like in the early 2000s that somehow has lasted. And people seem to really respond to that. So I appreciate that even my old work has continues to have a home with some folks. And then the culminating reading was at the Poetry Foundation in Chicago, which in many ways was like a homecoming for me. And the particular piece that I'm talking about, it's like this DJ piece that I read that's very musical. And it was written about this place that it was a life-saving space for me. It was called Red Dog, and it was a club in Chicago in the early to mid 90s. But really there were multiple spaces that I danced in as a younger person, and dancing was very, very important to me. So anyway, this particular piece, one of my oldest friends was there to hear it and to be there for the panel. And he was right there next to me dancing in those early 90s days. So it was just very special to have someone who had witnessed that moment, because it's like a different audience member, right? It's not someone that's just kind of taking it in theory. It's someone who lived that. Like, how important was that space for us as people of color and people who were artists that no one else understood? We just felt very free and safer in this space. So it was great to be able to share that work with old friends that, you know, maybe didn't know that side of me as much. So
there is so much I want to dive into with what you just shared.
Yes.
And I think I'm going to jump off of what you just shared in terms of the club, Red Dog, and that kind of like liberation that the space and the music allowed. When I was growing up, similarly, we had a little place in my small town called Sal's Pizza, which is where all the Texas hardcore punk rock shows happened. And I know punk has an influence in you, as well as house music, which is kind of its own version of punk, right? If we think about it, it's queer punk. So can you talk a little bit about the music that kind of influenced you, how it influenced you, and these spaces, right? And how those have influenced you as well?
Yeah. I'm unfortunately one of those people that there's good and bad. My father was an incredibly thoughtful and sweet man that was a community leader, but he was a minister. And I think that, unfortunately, while he was very, very queer positive and supported a lot of queer people in our church specifically, like this was during the AIDS crisis in the 80s, like there would be church members that, you know, that passed away, and he would go to the funeral even when the parents didn't, like things like that. While they felt supported, I think that there were certain things in the rhetoric of the church that completely shut down any possibility of me even imagining what I truly was. Like I was mentioning to someone the other day, I had this drawing in my diary at the time that that it was basically imagining something that was not male or female. And it was that kind of both. And I was so embarrassed by even having the thought that I completely inked it out with like Sharpie. And I have to write about that. And that's going to be in Wild, whatever ends up coming up about that. But anyway, so think of this young woman that is getting hit on. And even at one point, there was a male friend of mine that signed me up to be homecoming queen when that's the last thing that I wanted. So becoming punk, first of all, I loved all kinds of music. I was like watching Bobby McFerrin on PBS, as well as like opera, and then also diving into Devo and, you know, nowadays hunks and punks, or that's already old. That's like early 2000s. But anyway, but I loved everything, like country, all of it. So it just made sense for me because punk music was questioning all kinds of things. And you listen to X-Ray Specs, she's questioning gender roles and all kind, like even her later work is very environmental, polystyrene. So it just made sense for me to be part of the punk movement, even though it had certain issues in terms of race, like factions of it, not all of it, right? Like Jello Biafra was down, but like other factions of punk were not. So they had issues with racism and sexism still, but there was at least a space for that. And then especially I grew up with disco. Like my oldest friend and I were like dancing on top of her dining table, you know, as little babies to Donna Summer. So house music, which is a refashioning of disco, just made perfect sense to me. So you have some blending like Prince, who he was definitely pulling from some punk new wave stuff, and then also disco, of course, and a bunch of other things like Joni Mitchell and so forth. So I loved it all, and it just made sense to me, especially as someone who was clearly queer, but just didn't realize it yet, or didn't know that I was allowed to identify as queer. Because I'm like, well, I like guys, but I also have all these secret thoughts about women. It seems like this group accepts me the most.
Yeah.
So I just felt safer there. And I could even on occasion voice things and no one would bat an eyelash. I think if anything, they're like, pobrecita, she doesn't know yet.
Wow.
But yeah, these spaces were so instrumental. And then finally, you know, when I met my partner, this was someone who, on one of like our early hangouts, he was just, he was cooking in a skirt that had belonged to a male friend of his that had passed away. And it felt so incredibly awesome that he didn't bat an eyelash about just greeting me at the door with his skirt. And I felt like so safe in that moment. So like, this is where I belong. Mm-hmm. We just immediately understood each other. So yeah. And then he loves to dance to everything too. Like our first date was dancing at Twilo. And the date ended up lasting like 3 days. So yeah, so it's always been an empowering space for me.
A very queer first date, I feel like.
I agree.
There's no such thing as a 2-3 hour date. It goes. It's a whole weekend. It's a whole trip. That's a beautiful and amazing, and I as like you're telling this beautiful story of, I'm just engrossed really. And I'm like, wow, I really wish I could be in your class and take a class with you. Because you're so knowledgeable in like so many different aspects. So your students are very lucky. And I hope to still bring this energy and knowledge. And if you can just kind of bless us with your second poem, please. I think this is a great transition to keep the energy hyped up.
Well, I feel like because we've just been talking about music, I should share my DJ poem. It's one that I share. Okay, you want that? Okay, good. I had planned something else, but it just makes sense, so I'll share it.
Let me set us up with an appropriate DJ air horn.
All right. So this is Chicago DJ Remix, North and Damon, 1993. A song to sing for those of us who grew up in dance clubs and outlived everyone around us. After Barbara Tucker's Beautiful People. Deep, 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 deep. Fiasco's drinking gin and tonic. Deep, 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 deep. Fiasco's drinking gin and tonic. Deep, 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 deep. Curly girl is walking in with a fake fur. Deep, deep, deep blue. Light in the water, deep, deep red. Light in the water, deep, 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 deep. Coat check girl is under 18, but her dad is the owner, know what I mean. Deep down, deep down, deep down, deep down. Bartender is her brother. I ain't ever seen her mother. Deep down, deep down, deep down, deep down. Curly girl is spinning in the middle of the crowd. Deep down, deep down, deep down. Don't go into the stairwell. The walls and the floorboards have a thing or two to tell you. Deep down, deep down, deep down, deep down. A sniff, a pipe, a sip, a life. Deep down, deep down. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Deep down. Slide that leg. Arms reach overhead and bounce. Deep down and bounce. Deep down. Hide in a groove, in a circle that moves. Deep down in the wax, deep down, skipping beats on the tracks, in the wax, deep down, curly girl is walking out as the loop ends. Deep, 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 gathering in the alley, cars driving off to who, where, deep, 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 goodbye, deep, deep, good night.
Oh man, that was amazing. You know, when I think when poets say that they incorporate music, I feel like they either start or they like incorporate pieces of song. I did not expect you to like do the whole entire thing.
I think that's the words and shit first, where we have someone sing an entire poem. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. It was truly, I was transported.
Oh, yay, great.
It's so interesting because that poem is so industrial. Like it really, especially the way that you deliver it, it really puts you in that very industrial, very underground. There's probably not a ceiling, exposed pipes. There's, paint on the walls. Like, I don't know, I've been in those spaces. So I know, right? And like it transports you to it. And in looking at kind of like your journey across the country, right? Chicago, big old Chicago, New York, big old New York, even San Antonio is pretty big and pretty metropolitan, right? In contrast to kind of like what we were talking about earlier and the nature of it all and la naturaleza and the animals, right? And the flora and the fauna that are sometimes quite removed from these industrial places. I know you recently spent some time at Firefly Farms for a Sundress Academy residency. And so I wanted to ask you, did you feed the goats or the chickens?
There were no goats, but I fed both sheep and chickens.
Okay.
Yes. And that was, sorry?
I was there last fall and there were sheep and goats.
Oh, okay.
So,
all right. So you know what's up. You know what it's like.
I loved it. It was such a fantastic week there. And so like, that was just a joke question. My real question is, like how do you balance the naturaleza and that environment of being out on a farm in Tennessee with your industrious upbringing? And where are you finding yourself moving between the two?
Well, it's interesting. So I specifically sought out that residency because I felt like there were some things about interacting with nature that I don't have experience with, right? Like whenever I interact with nature, it's a very mediated experience, right? I'm going to a beach that has been combed and cleaned. And even if I go into the forest, I'm on a trail that someone developed and made sure looked a certain way. So I felt like I need to know at least a little bit about nature,
Untamed,
tending to nature, right? And I find that is something that is best left to the experts. I didn't have a problem feeding the sheep, but some of them were almost as tall as me. I am a petite woman. So it was a little bit scary for me at points. And then this is a farm that, everything is kind of just open for, it's an enclosed space, but it's kind of open for the animals, so the animals can do their thing wherever they want. So the chickens are laying their eggs wherever they want. So you have to kind of go scrounging around and finding the eggs. It's an egg hunt every morning. So I came to realize I already knew this intellectually, that farm work is hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard, and we have to be that much more grateful for our gente that do this work for us every day. They need to be paid more. If they are migrant workers, they need clear documentation that makes them safe and protects their work. Our gente do really, really challenging work, and we need to protect them. Very few of us can do that work at this point. We've not been trained. So I think that is important. I also think it's important to have those mediated spaces so that we can just appreciate being in nature. It's so important for us to have more and more protected lands, where we can just go to a beautiful park and know that we have rangers there that are making sure that we'll, for the most part, be safe in them. And we get our oxygen from nature. We get a lot of mental health benefits from nature. So we need these mediated spaces. For those of us who are city folk, we need to be able to go into these spaces on a regular basis. So that's the way that I see it. I also want, like, my real goal, and this was something that I wrote about in my dissertation, my real goal would be to have an exchange where rural folk can come into the city and see what that environment is like, and city folk can go into a rural space and spend time there and see what that's like. Because right now we're very divided ideologically. And I feel like if we understood each other's spaces and understood the beauty that occurs in both, we really could have more empathy for each other. So who knows, maybe when I'm finally a viejita, I can find some funding to make this happen in some way. Yeah.
No, you're so right. And especially in the three places that we just mentioned, Chicago, New York, San Antonio, right? Texas, Illinois, and New York, all of them have these like highly concentrated metropolitan areas and then vast expanses of wilderness, right? And never the two of the populations shall meet is kind of how it feels. So I think bridging that divide, is really important work that needs to continue to happen. I don't have a question. I'll hand it over to Rocky. I was just
I definitely think like there is connection to where you're saying like experiencing these different spaces and different communities to understand one another. And then earlier on in our podcast, you were saying that the art of activism looks like community, right? And for our listeners and viewers, you are an editor, right? And in multiple different types of journals, or creative writing editor as well. And then also being part of this beautiful anthology, because when you were talking about it and I had it and I was like, I can't believe I didn't like prep it right next to my desk. Hold on. It's like right next to me, if you don't mind me being really awkward.
Being awkward is part of our nature. Awkward, brave, and kind. Oh my God, there's Brene Brown again.
For people who actually can see this, like Daughters of like Latin America, which is a huge, beautiful anthology as well. And I got to I got to see Sandra Guzman with Esmeralda Santiago do like a Q&A at Hunter, and I was like, amazing. So can you talk about like what it means to be in like community in these spaces, and have your works be in these like type of anthologies, as well as like editing and creating other works that combine other voices to build community?
Well, it's something that we cannot take for granted. When I was a kid, I grew up in a neighborhood that was predominantly Latino in Chicago called Logan Square. It was mainly Latino and Polish. And while there were many, many lovely Polish folks who embraced the Latinos who were moving into the space in the late 60s and early 70s, there were some that were pretty racist towards us. And there was really this feeling that even though many of us were homeowners or business owners in the area, there was this predominant feeling of like, there weren't a lot of options, even for those of us who were getting our educations. So for me to have these connections with other Latinas that have gotten their educations all over the world in that case, right? In Daughters of Latin America, it's like in every country you can possibly imagine, in so many different languages as well. But women all over the US, outside of the US, to, you know, I have my anthology behind me, Latina Outsiders. There we go. Now I'm doing it correctly. Latina Outsiders, Remaking Latina Identity, to find other Latinas that always felt even outside of the Latino culture, right? Because we're weird thinkers and we're punkers, or we just have a different way of viewing the world. It's such a gift to even find your people. So many of us don't have that opportunity. So we have to keep creating those opportunities. And I feel very, very fortunate to be working with Malks and Chicana Latina Studies Journal as a creative writing editor, and, you know, to just amplify those voices that don't necessarily get amplified in other spaces. And most recently, I just started a position as a poetry editor at Feminist Press's Women's Studies Quarterly Journal.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So not only do I have this community with my fellow editors, but then I get to amplify the voices of people who are doing beautiful things out there. So it's something that, you know, when these opportunities present themselves, you're like, oh, that's amazing, but you don't really feel how major this impact is until you start doing the work and you just see all of these women coming together. And obviously this is just one small part, like Mi Gente and the Trevor Project, and there are all these other organizations that do the same thing. It's none of these places take it for granted. It's really a blessing that we're able to do this. And it's very, very exciting.
Yeah. I think all of us really feel the importance of community. We, all three of us, work pretty actively in creating and fostering and nurturing community spaces. I think I can safely say that. I know I'm barely getting to know you, Grisel, but just what I've learned in this past conversation and in the research I did, I feel confident in that statement. And knowing Raquel for as long as I have, similar. So we truly appreciate the work that you do in bringing communities, especially communities of color and women communities together. So this kind of like leads to our final question of the evening. We end every conversation with the same question, which is, what would be the title of the poem for the next chapter of your life?
Oh, that's a good one and a hard one.
Yeah.
The next chapter of my life. Well, I'm older now. And I find myself in all these roles where I'm kind of, I don't see myself that way yet, but I see myself like I'm starting to be this elder.
Yes.
So I want something that conveys like that older badass, you know, like there's this great song by Alice Bagg. I think it's called Se Cree Joven, where she's talking about wanting to wear what she wants to wear at any age. And just being this older badass woman. So I guess maybe this is not good. I would need to edit this, but the older badass shares gifts.
Ooh,
Something to that effect.
Yes.
Look, as someone who is terrible at naming poems, I do not envy having to answer this question. But I think, I think that nails it. I think
it really does. It really does. It is so funny because it's like you don't think you're an elder until you start going into like very young spaces and you're like, oh, they're looking up to us, right? And I think like our friends, we call ourselves like we're in our doña eras, right? We like skip señora, we're like just doñas, like call us doña.
yeah, word, good.
But no, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. Really, really great to like connect with you, not only because you have roots in San Antonio and we kind of a little discussed like before the show that we were somehow in the same vein, same space, and now we're in like the CUNY-verse, right? Both of us. Yeah, that's what we call it. That's what we...
There's just so many campuses. It is the CUNY-verse.
It is the CUNY-verse.
This is my first time hearing that.
Oh, yes, that's what us admin call it, like the CUNY-verse. And so it's really great to finally connect with you. So if you can, please tell us like where people can find you and your work so they can also connect and build community with you.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm on all the socials except for TikTok. I don't want to create that much content. I'm sorry, folks. Estoy cansada. Like I have grading to do. So yeah. I'm not on TikTok, but I'm on other things. So like the old folks Facebook, the thing I still call Twitter.
Yes.
Instagram is probably the best space, and Threads, I'm still not even sure what that is. It's like I'm there, but I don't know. I'm not there. But anyway, so yeah, people can find me that way. They can also find me through my campus, which is Bronx Community College, and you can just email me through there. Please come out to any forthcoming things that I post on social media. I'm really not actively pursuing any readings right now because I just want to finish this book and I'm trying to concentrate on that. So this summer I'll really be writing, but I may have a workshop coming out every now and then. So yeah, so just take a look at my social media and I'll have the announcements there.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful. This was a blast.
Yeah, a blessed
Thank you.
Conversation. Thank you, Grisel. Mira, Raquel, she said something there at the end that really resonated. I think is the title of the poem for the next chapter of my life. Estoy cansada.
Estoy cansada. I felt like that was almost like a Bad Bunny song. Like, estoy cansada. En esta casa.
Estoy cansada, voy a la cama. Okay.
Yeah, we're poets, not rappers.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not like Grisel, who can just like do this amazing like DJ set.
Yeah. But I am tired. We are living in an exhausting time where there's so much work to do. And I think what for me continues to help motivate me and keep me grounded and also keep me going is my comunidad, right? My community, right? And the poets that I'm close to, the people that are not poets that I'm close to, my colleagues at work, like I try to stay connected as much as possible because without each other, I have this haiku I wrote, which is pride without community is a fuck you in a stampede of sheep.
Mm.
You know, we will just be run over by the sheep if we don't have our community there to help us. So, where's your community?
Oh, where's my community? My community is in different parts I see from home. I feel like just like Grisel was kind of saying, as they kind of inhabit different parts, right? Like I find community in Jersey, in San Antonio, to Brooklyn. But mostly like those homes are like family and my like queer, my queer peeps to like the chosen family, right? Those like really hold me down. And even our romantic like relationships too, right?
I did romantic, and he's a sweetheart.
Yes. So I think those like finding really radical joy within these communities and our families and our friends and our loved ones is what kind of gives us strength to keep on going. And just like Lisa was saying, like my community loves to dance and we love to sing. And whenever it is bleak times, we've tried to find spaces. Like literally, I'm kind of sick, but there's a Selena Fest, a queer Selena Fest in Brooklyn tomorrow. And me and my friends, we're going to go get dressed up and dance. And I feel like that's how we celebrate joy and community.
Well, take your vitamina C, take your echinacea, take your oregano, sana colita de rana, cebolla en los pies, todo sanarás mañana. Well, I forget already. So let's thank some people and go be in community, shall we?
Yeah. So first we want to say thank you to the listeners, y'all out here. We couldn't be doing these seasons. We're in season 4. We're about to hopefully wrap up season 4 soon. And it wouldn't be because of y'all, right? We're here. We're still doing it. So thank you so much for listening, supporting us. We can't do this without you.
Absolutely. Our theme music, too, is produced by, speaking of queer artists in New York City, Chris Conde. Make sure you support queer artists all over.
Yeah, and thank you to Riot Art Out and the City of San Antonio Department of Arts and Culture, whose support has helped produce this podcast.
And you can always follow us on IG and Twitter. We're calling it Twitter at Words and Shh. And so you can find out about new episodes coming up.
Yeah, and if you have missed our past episodes, don't worry about it. You can watch or listen to our episodes on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget, like, subscribe, rate, and review. Help us share this show and the amazing work of the poets that we feature on this show. Like I said at the top of the show, come for your favorites, but come discover stay for some new ones, right? Until next time, stay safe out there.
Bye.